I want to talk about so much. I want to talk about love and compassion and wisdom. I want to talk about um, the movement. I want to talk about Missy Elliott. I want to talk about Pose. I want to talk about Candy, Ferocity, and how we need to get Angelica Ross on a retreat to teach with us. I want to talk about being free. And I want to talk about what it means to be young right now, in such revolutionary, transformative times. I want to talk about the necessity of going to the front lines of our work and doing our work right now. I want to talk about everything. I want to talk about, get back to the remembering. So I think that's how I'm going to talk about everything. And I'm not necessarily interested in talking about secular mindfulness. That's for someone else. But what I do want to talk about is the heart of awareness. What awareness is, and the transformative power of awareness as we attempt to remember. So some of you may not know this. Some of you may know this actually. But mindfulness comes from this Buddhist tradition, this system of meditation. This, what we call scripture, sutta called the Satipatthana. Satipatthana, which means the 4 foundations of mindfulness, roughly. But Satipatthana, sati is actually the word that holds energy for me. Because sati, one of the main interpretations of the word sati is remembering. Remembering, not to notice, not to pay attention to, not to be conscious of, but to remember. To remember. And for me, so much of my practice is simply this act of remembering who I am. Remembering not just the parts of me that are really great and fantastic and sassy, right? But remembering the parts of me that are difficult, the parts of me that are full of pain, the parts of me that I would rather run away from. And I have run away from. But I know that there's no liberation in running away from. And so sati, remembering, actually reminds me that I can only be free when I go turn around and move into the things that scare me to death. And often the things that have scared me to death have been actually me. I have been the one that I've been most afraid of in my life. And I don't know, like some of you or many of you, I actually didn't really get raised in a context that taught me that I was valued, that I belonged. I was, kind of raised in a context, but this context, American context, Southern American context, really with this energy, this belief, this perspective that actually I was more like a burden, in the world, because I was a burden, no one, the culture in general didn't really try so hard to take care of me, to take care of others who looked like me. And so you began life with this deficit in many ways, this depletion. And so much of my work, when I got older, when I got to your age, actually many of your ages, not Mother Teresa's ages, but like your ages, the young folks' ages, 14, 15, 13, 14, 15, when I said, there's got to be something better than this intense kind of self-loathing, this shame, this internalized, this internalized devaluing of who I was, right? And I turned my attention, I remembered my community, I remembered my community's history, and I remembered that there have been so many people who fought for freedom, who fought for Black people to be seen, to be heard. So I remembered the Dr. Kings and the Malcolm X's and the Fannie Lou Hamers and the Harriet Tubmans. I remembered how Black people in Haiti organized and took back their freedom. And then the French came back and subsequently reversed that freedom. But I remembered the Black Panthers. I remembered all of these people. I remembered my family. I remember my mother, who was my closest living example of what it meant to work for freedom, to ensure the freedom of those around her, including for myself. I remember the mothers in my community, the fathers, the aunties and the uncles and the grandfathers and the grandparents. I remember that we formed collectives to take care of each other. We formed churches to ward off the impact of systematic oppression, systematic racism. And to remember meant to remember that I already came from a legacy of people surviving, but not only just surviving, but thriving within conditions that were made to annihilate them. And so to move into this period right now, to be in this period of movement, for me is remembering that, I come from a people who's done this before. That I come from a community in many ways who invented and came up with significant contributions to what we understand about collective freedom and liberation. And that's more than just a point of inspiration for me or for anyone else. It's actually a lived experience. It is something that is like a trans-historical memory that I am really learning how to open up to accept for my own, to accept as my own legacy. Not this depletion that I was raised with, but this intense joy, this resiliency, to remember that, to walk out into the world and to remember that I belong here. That I don't actually need anyone's permission to belong here. That my ancestors built this country, but we built it on land that was taken away from other ancestors. And so one of the things that I try to remember every day is the land. The earth. And this land that I sit on now, people call Boston, but this is actually called Shamans. This was the ancestral indigenous land of the Wampanoag people, the Nipmuc people, the Massachusetts people. These people, these indigenous people, these ancestral people took care of this land. They lived on this land. They loved this land, and this land was taken away from them. And we have to consciously, actively remember that this country, this land has a different narrative outside of colonialism and slavery. that this land has a name, and this name was about the beauty of the land, how the land took care of its people and how the people took care of the land. To remember the land, to remember the name of the land that we're sitting on and living on and practicing on, is to remember people, a nation of people, to reclaim history, even though that history is difficult, it's full of pain, it's full of trauma, but we remember it anyway because we're not interested in repeating that history. And what happens in this country is we get really good at repeating everything over and over again. It's like, basically the land, the country is in trauma. And trauma is this thing that just repeats, it cycles over and over again until we actually disrupt the trauma, until we give the trauma space, until we allow ourselves to have choice and agency in how we relate to the energy of trauma that's trapped in our bodies. But it's the same thing with the land. We have to recognize the trauma of the land, and we begin to take care of the trauma by remembering that the land has life, that it had a name before many of us ever arrived here. And one of the things that is important to remember is to remember that naming and renaming is such a revolutionary act. To call something a name to evoke is inherent freedom. It's inherent power to call ourselves a name, to invoke our freedom, to identify our genders and our gender expressions in a way that is deeply related to our own freedom in this world. Regardless of what the world says about who and what we should be, we first and foremost have the agency to first name ourselves and to walk out into the world with a name that we have given ourselves, a name that our community of choice, our family of choice has given us. To embrace our beauty, to embrace our uniqueness, to embrace our love and our compassion, to name, to remember the names. It's so incredibly important. And I remember the ancestors. And just take a moment. I want you to reflect on your ancestors. As we used to say when I was growing up, who are your people? Where are your people? We're part of a continuum, a lineage of so many beings who've come before us. Can you remember that in this moment? Because in my practice, my liberation depends on remembering where I come from. The people who made sure that I had what I needed in order to be in this world. And as you remember your ancestors, I want you to remember your descendants. And you're going to say, Rod, but who are my descendants? My descendants aren't here. I want you to remember your descendants because your remembering of your descendants in this moment is actually an act that begins to call forth your descendants into this world. It doesn't matter. It's not about having kids. It's not about that. It's about the legacy that I will leave that will deeply influence all those coming after me. So to recognize that there are others waiting to come after me, to take my place, to remember that I am more than a descendant of my ancestors, I am also an ancestor in training. I am both an ancestor in training and a descendant of my ancestors. And one of my jobs is to prepare the path for the descendants to come into this world, to continue the work that I've started, which is really the work that I continued from my ancestors. And we remember the elders. Remember your elders. Who are your elders? Sometimes eldership isn't about age. It's about the love someone has for you. It's about the wisdom that someone carries. It's about someone's commitment to the health of the collective. So who are your elders? Who do you look to for guidance and advice? When you need to remember who you are, who do you go to? Who's helping you remember who you are? And I want you to remember your body. That you have a body, and this body in this relative world has identity. And that these identities are important for you. These identities tell the story of who we want to be in this world. Because I have a right, just like you, to choose whom I want to be and to choose a way of being that is much more aligned with the liberation of not just myself, but those around me. What is the version of yourself that's the most freest? The most loving, the most compassionate, the most wise, the most sassiest, the most intelligent, whatever is important for you. Can you remember your most authentic self? I am all kinds of things. I am queer and Black and fat and poor, but I'm working on that. I am intelligent. I am radical. What are you? Who are you? I wonder if you can remember your community, your collective. Who is your community? What is your community? Where do you belong? Who are the people taking care of you? Who loves you? Who wants you to be free? Who wants you to be happy? And in return, who are the people that you want to be free and happy? And our communities, our collectives, they can be our blood family. They're our chosen family. Because as some of us get older, some of us will struggle with our families. And we will have to do the work of choosing the people to become families in our lives. Can you remember your deep desire to be free? And do you even know what freedom means for you? Can you remember your dreams of freedom? Because I think that people who do not dream cannot actually understand what liberation is. What are your dreams? Can you remember that love is revolutionary? Can you remember that when you want someone to be free from suffering, to be free from harm, and to be happy, that you are wishing them the most kindest, the most intense, fiercest thing that you can ever wish someone? May you be free. May you be free from the suffering that causes you to engage in violence. May you be free from self-hate. May you be free from all the ways that you believe that you're unlovable, or all the ways you believe that you can't return love. May you be free from that. May you dream into a future where you are free from all the bounds that come from a lack of creativity, a lack of fluidity. And what I wish in this moment for you is imagination and audacity. And this one day, the ability not to keep sacrificing your needs, thinking that your needs are not important. I wonder if you can remember your compassion, your transformative compassion, your compassion that says, you know what, I'm going to give a shit. That in order for me to touch you, I have to touch myself, I have to touch my own discomfort. And when I touch my own discomfort, I will know that you too are uncomfortable. And that's where we have to have the conversation. And then all of that for me lands into remembering what I call perfect wisdom, clarity. Everything opens up, everything is seen clearly, everything is apparent, straightforward. Everything is laid out in front of me in a way that I can engage with. There's no more delusion, there's no more ambiguity, there's no more ignorance. When I get to that place, then I will understand freedom. And maybe at that point, I will become an elder. So when I think about mindfulness, I think about the remembering. I think about remembering everything. We have to remember everything. We have to recall everything back into consciousness, and we have to summon all the missing parts to reassemble. At the end of the day, I am practicing to become whole. to become assembled. And that wholeness and that assembly is also what I call healing. When I am assembled, I am healed. When I am healed, I remember who and what I am. When I remember who and what I am, these systems around me have no more power over me to define what I am or who I am. You know, the systems are only there to make us forget, to separate us, to splinter us. So my last wish for you is for you to use this practice, this time together, to reassemble, to come back together and remember. I believe that is our sacred work in this life.
Yes, 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 sacred work.
Yes. So again, to the elders in the space, to the parents, to the ancestors, and to the youth who are training to become elders, who will one day pass into their ancestry. I offer this gift to you. May we all be free.